All right, we're going to do a one-time segment. This is our preseason revisit for our hits on record prediction and our atomic misses. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the SEC. I had Texas going 9-3, and Texas went 9-3 with the win against Texas A&M. I had them, I think, perfect all the way through. Losing to Ohio State, I expected that pretty obviously. And then losing to Florida, a lot of people probably didn't have that. I thought that Florida was going to win that game preseason. And then when the game actually rolled around, Florida ended up being trash. And I was not expecting them to win. And they won anyway. So my preseason expectation hit there. And then I figured they would lose to A&M or sorry, I figured they would beat A&M to end the season and they would drop. Um, we might have to cut this. I can't remember what their third loss was.
Well, it would have been Ohio State and then Florida
Who
and
was their third
then
loss?
probably Georgia. Surely you
Oh
had
my
Georgia.
gosh. Yeah. Sorry. And then I had them losing to Georgia um, in Athens. I didn't see them winning that game just with the history um, of that game and how it's been lately. So I think I had them perfect down the stretch. And then I had LSU at 8-4. I'm giving myself a shout for this one. I know they went 7-5, but a lot of people had them going like 10-2 or 11-1. Some people had them going undefeated. So I think having LSU on the under for wins was a hit. Had Oklahoma at 10-2, hit on that. I didn't predict their schedule perfectly. I think I had them losing to South Carolina, expecting a lot more from them, as we'll see just in a second. But had them at 10-2, just missing out on the SEC championship. Had Vanderbilt at 6-6. This is where we get into the atomic misses. Apology letter filed for Vanderbilt, sending directly to Clark Lee and Diego Pavia. This was a bad miss. Had Florida going 9-3. They almost went 3-9. So not a good one. Had South Carolina at 9-3, and I think they ended up going 3-9, didn't they? Or
I
are they
think
four and
they
eight?
were 4-8.
So not a great finish for South Carolina. Both those teams. I mean, if you had told me their quarterbacks stayed healthy for most of the season and they still underperformed this badly, I would have been shook. But yeah, you go back to August and tell me that, I wouldn't have believed you. So both those teams massively underperformed for me. And there were some people having them making the playoffs. I had them just coming up short in my preseason expectations, but I was still way off. So SEC was interesting, turned out really neat. The Big 12, I think, was the worst one for me. I barely had anything going for me in the hits category. I had Iowa State going 9-3. They went 8-4, and that was the closest I got. I had a couple other ones that were within one game, but that was the most notable one. They're the only consistent team in the Big 12. My atomic misses, I had Houston and Arizona going 5-7. I had BYU going 6-6, and Baylor going 9-3. So not too great. I was within one game on several teams, but nothing really notable there. Super volatile conference, like we talked about preseason, to be expected. Had in the ACC SMU going 8-4, and that ended up hitting, so that was a good one. Had FSU going 5-7, that one ended up hitting home. FSU finishing the season with a blowout loss against Florida. That was disgusting. And then, unfortunately, in the atomic misses category, we have Clemson. We're not going to talk about the fact that I had them going 11-1 like everybody else. I'm not a casual, I swear. Had Clemson going 11-1. I have North Carolina going 8-4. I don't know what kind of drugs I was taking when I made those picks. I think Bill Belichick might have had me at gunpoint. There's a chance. Had them going 8-4, not even close on that one. So the ACC, not too much going on there. The Big Ten is where I think I took home a lot of hits. I had USC going 9-3. I think that for the most part, I got most of those games right that they played in. I can't remember off the top of my head. Had Rutgers going 5-7. Maryland 4-8. I had them starting off 4-0, I'm pretty sure, and then dropping the next 8 games. I had to double check that. I'm pretty sure I did. I know I had Michigan right all the way through. I had them dropping all their big games against Oklahoma, USC, and Ohio State. Had Nebraska once again going 7-5. That one was fun. Seeing them finish out the season 7-5 was hilarious. Typical Nebraska fashion. And unfortunately, my two atomic misses were pretty atomic. I had Penn State going 11-1. And just like Clemson, I think this is one we can just kind of scrub off the whiteboard and forget about.
I mean, there's really nobody that had those teams being bad, to be fair.
You've got to give us some slack on that one. I promise we didn't let the media completely affect us on that. We did. So maybe next year
Well,
we'll learn a lesson.
we didn't bite on them being like actual national championship contenders like a lot of people did.
I think we had them all getting
We had
not
them
first
in the
rounded.
playoff and like being good teams, but we did not legitimately think they had national championship
We didn't have them
possibility.
going on runs.
No.
I think their schedules were still favorable despite the fact that they underperformed. So given what we were expecting them to possibly improve on, we expected 11 wins out of those teams, and that's not what happened. I also had UCLA going 8-4 on top of the expectation that Nico Emaliaba would have some supporting cast. They were able to have some fun this season, going 3-9 with a couple wins, beating Penn State, but the beginning and end of the season were not great. So very atomic miss on that one. I owe Indiana another massive apology. I had them going 8-4, but I saw the chances for Indiana to be a legitimate team this year. It was all going to hinge on Fernando Mendoza for me, and that panned out. So had them going 8-4, they finished 12-0. Atomic miss there. That wraps up my preseason revisits. I think that the Big Ten was my biggest takeaway. I think that conference is extremely predictable.
Yeah, it's so
I was
predictable.
barely a game off on most of the other teams. So
All right, so I'm gonna start off in the SEC, and I'm actually just gonna quickly tear through every single team in the Power Four here. So I had Georgia at 11-1, that came true. I had Texas at 11-1, they ended up going 9-3. Bama at 10-2 ended up being correct. I did have them going 6-2 in the SEC though, and winning the Florida State game, so that went a little bit differently than I expected. LSU at 9-3, missed on that one as they went 7-5. I also had South Carolina at 9-3. Most people thought they were going to be pretty good again. That did not pan out. Oklahoma at 9-3, pretty close there as they went 10-2. And then I had four teams at 8-4, and 3 out of 4 of these were pretty bad misses. A&M and Ole Miss, both I had them going 8-4. They both went 11-1. Florida at 8-4 actually was low compared to a lot of people in the preseason, but they were not even close to that, going 4-8. And then Tennessee, I had going 8-4, and they actually went 8-4. Auburn at 7-5, they went 5-7, but easily could have been 7-5 with some of those games. Arkansas and Missouri both at 6-6. Missouri winds up at 8-4. Arkansas at 2-10, and then huge miss here. Vandy at 5-7. I was just not a believer that they were going to be able to build on last year. Huge, but they did. Mississippi State at 4-8. I only missed on one game for their whole season. That was Arizona State, and then Kentucky had them going 3-9. They went what 5-7, wasn't it?
yeah, with the blowout loss against Louisville, they got lost. I think they got beat 41
41
to
to nothing.
0. We
Yeah,
both had Kentucky in that game too, which sucks.
they
But
just had some inexplicable wins that made no
it
sense.
was disgusting. And I gotta give myself a little bit of credit on Mississippi State. The only game I was off on was the Missouri game.
We were both one game off on.
So I think that you got to give some cred. I mean, we were all over Mississippi State this season. Everybody had them going on the under on wins, like 2-10, 3-9. So I think we were pretty close on that.
Moving to the Big 12, I had some bad ones here. I had Baylor going 10-2. I thought they'd be riding some momentum from their strong finish last year. That was not the case at all. They were terrible. Texas Tech at 10-2 was pretty solid. They went 11-1. I had Kansas State going 9-3. They've been pretty consistent in the Big 12, but they had a down year. I had Utah at 9-3. They went 10-2, so pretty solid there. Arizona State at 9-3. They wound up going 8-4. And then I had two teams going 8-4 here with TCU and Iowa State, and they both actually did go 8-4. So two hits there. I had Cincinnati at 6-6. They went 7-5. Houston at 6-6. They wound up going 9-3. Kansas at 6-6. They missed that by a game at 5-7. I was a little low on Arizona as I had them going 6-6, and they went 9-3. I had Colorado finding their way to a bowl game at 6-6. They went 3-9. And then a big miss here. I think you also had BYU at 6-6 as well. West Virginia, I had them going 6-6. They ended up going 4-8. I had UCF at 4-8. They went 5-7, and then Oklahoma State had them finishing last in the conference, but still I gave them way too much credit at 4-8 as they went 1-11.
Yeah, we probably both need to write BYU an apology letter as well. unfortunately. That was bad news.
Yeah, that was really rough for us. And speaking of rough for me, as we move into the ACC, Clemson at 11-1, just like you had them at 11-1 also. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I mean, everybody had that to be fair. I had SMU at 9-3. If they had taken care of business against Cal last week, I would have been right there. I had Miami at 8-4, so a little bit low on them. Georgia Tech at 8-4, pretty close with that one as they went 9-3. Louisville at 9-3, they ended up going 8-4. I had Pitt at 8-4, that was correct. I had NC State at 8-4, they went 7-5. I had Virginia Tech at 7-5, they went 3-9. So pretty bad miss there. I figured they were gonna have a better year this year, but that was just not the case whatsoever. I had Syracuse at 6-6. They went 3-9 and were absolutely terrible down the stretch. So pretty bad miss there. I had North Carolina also having a decent year at 7-5, and that was just never going to be the case. I had Duke at 6-6, which wasn't terrible because they went 7-5, even though they're in the conference championship game somehow. I had Cal at 5-7. They went 7-5. I also hit on Florida State at 5-7, so we both did pretty good with that one. I had Virginia at 6-6. Nobody expected them to go 10-2. I mean, that came out of nowhere, so can't really fault me for that one. I had Boston College at 4-8. They went 2-10, I think, maybe 3-9. I had Wake at 3-9. They inexplicably went 8-4. No one saw that one coming. And then I had Stanford going winless, and they somehow ended up going 4-8 with how bad they looked in the early part of the year. And then moving on to the Big Ten, this is where I had my most success as well. I actually had Ohio State going 10-2 again. I had them losing to Texas and Michigan first game of the year and last game of the year, but they go 12-0. I did have Penn State going 11-1. Nobody saw their 6-6 season coming, so can't fault me for that one. I had Oregon at 10-2. They went 11-1. I think the only game I missed out on them for was Indiana. I had Michigan at 9-3, so hit on that one. I had Indiana at 9-3. They wound up going 12-0. I had Washington at 9-3. They went 8-4. I had USC at 8-4. They went 9-3. I was also a little too high on UCLA, or not a little too high. I was also way too high on UCLA. I had them at 7-5. They go 3-9. I actually perfectly predicted Illinois' season at 8-4, down to every last game. I had Iowa at 7-5. They went 8-4. Nebraska at 7-5. They went 7-5. Wisconsin at 6-6. A little too high on them. They went 4-8. Minnesota 7-5. They did go 7-5. Michigan State at 6-6. They wound up going 4-8. I had Rutgers at 5-7, and I actually perfectly predicted their season as well. I had Northwestern at 3-9. They somehow went 6-6, made a bowl game. I had Maryland at 3-9, 0-9. I predicted all their games correct except for their win against Wisconsin. And then Purdue down here at 2-10, 0-9. I predicted their season.
Yeah, I like that we're doing this segment. I don't think there's many podcasts out there that do it the way that we're doing it right now. This is the first time we've done this, so I'm not saying that we've been doing this for a while. This is the first time I've gone back and looked at full preseason predictions. It's really fun because I remember all these conversations that we had before the football season, all the different expectations and ideas and different ways we saw this season going. And now, after 12 weeks of football, sitting and looking back on those conversations, it's just crazy. All the memories created from the football season, being able to do this and have this conversation on the pod. I think it's a cool segment. I look forward to doing it next year. I really would love to see if there's anybody else doing it. If there's a better way to do it. I want to see if there's maybe a software we can use to do individual game picks so we know and can see those. The way that we put them out on our socials, we just had the records and standings. I'd love to be able to find a way to compact it so you can see each game pick because we got a lot of seasons like for full teams correct. And I'd love to be able to kind of have that on record so it doesn't look like we just totally made that up. But there's really no way to condense that down to where it's postable material. So you kind of just got to take our word for it.
Did you pick all the games on Playoff Predictors, the website?
I think I
Because I did,
did.
but it's really hard to post that. That'd be a lot of posts.
I don't know if I can recover most of that. I did like halfway through
I've got them
some of them
all
on
actually
playoff predictors.
right here for every conference too. Because
That's
I
sweet.
quickly did the G5 conferences one day. So I actually have every game picked for the whole season.
That's pretty cool. We may have to do that next year. That's what we wanted to do initially, but we got so close to the season and it was just crunch time. Football was more important. It was being played in week 0 and week 1 than us making preseason predictions at that point. So we kind of put that on the back burner as we were starting a new podcast. So I think next year we'll have a lot more laid out of a plan on how we want to tackle that. But this was a fun segment for me. I'm glad we did this one. So looking forward to doing it again.
And next week, playoff predictions. We'll go back to our week 1 predictions.
That's
For
going to
that.
be funny. So, unfortunately, we'll see the disgusting logos of the Penn State Nittany
Uh,
Lions and Clemson Tigers up on there. But we got some other ones that we did get right. So, excited about that. Looking forward to it.